He needed someone to survive his family's wedding interrogation, so the billionaire made a deal with a woman who had nothing, $10,000 to pretend for 4 days. But Monica Fowler didn't pretend. She walked into his mother's brutal dinner, called out every assumption they made about her, and forced Joseph to see the scared boy hiding behind his empire. The moment he chose his family's approval over her dignity, everything shattered, and now he's hunting through rose gardens, desperate to prove he's brave enough to choose her when it actually costs him something. Welcome back, my strong family and friends, to Mr. Crown Stories. If no one told you today, let me tell you this: you are worthy of love that sees you, truly sees you. I create these stories for hearts like yours, hearts that have known disappointment but refuse to stop hoping, hearts that believe real connection is worth the risk. If this story speaks to you, click subscribe, leave a comment saying "I'm here," and tell me where you're watching from. Tomorrow brings another story, and you won't want to miss it. Every word is written for you, the one who still believes in second chances. Now, let us begin. The explosion of crystal against marble echoed through Joseph Prater's penthouse office like a gunshot. His hand froze mid-air, the empty tumbler he'd knocked over now glittering in shards across the polished floor. He didn't move to clean it. Didn't call anyone. Just stood there, staring at the phone in his other hand, at the message that had just detonated his carefully constructed plans. Joseph, I can't do this. Marina. His date for his brother's wedding, cancelled. 4 days before the biggest family event of the year. Joseph's jaw tightened as he turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Manhattan sprawled beneath him, a glittering empire of steel and ambition, buildings he owned or had invested in dotting the skyline like chess pieces on a board he controlled. Usually, this view calmed him. Tonight, it only reminded him how much power he wielded everywhere except the one place that mattered. At 36, Joseph Prater had built a reputation that made Wall Street brokers nervous and tech CEOs return his calls within minutes. He could predict market shifts with unsettling accuracy, close billion-dollar deals over breakfast, and command boardrooms across 5 continents with a single glance. His empire wasn't just successful, it was inevitable, unstoppable. But his family? His old money, blue blood, Connecticut estate family who measured worth in pedigree and propriety? They were his kryptonite. And now he'd have to face them alone. Joseph pressed the intercom button, his voice clipped. Helen. My office. Now. Moments later, Helen Wagner stepped through the door, her tablet already in hand, posture calm and composed as always. She took in the shattered glass, then Joseph's expression, and her eyes sharpened with understanding. What happened? She asked, closing the door behind her. Joseph exhaled through his teeth. Marina cancelled. The wedding is this weekend. I need a date. Helen's eyebrows lifted slightly. Define date. Someone appropriate, Joseph muttered, loosening his tie as he paced. Beautiful, composed, intelligent. Someone who can survive conversations with my mother without needing therapy afterward. So, a miracle worker, Helen said dryly. Joseph shot her a look. Someone who won't embarrass me. Someone who can navigate high society without falling apart. Someone. Real, Helen finished. Someone who feels authentic. Exactly. Joseph turned back to the window. My family will dissect whoever I bring. They always do. They need to believe she's legitimate, or I'll spend the entire weekend deflecting interrogations. Helen was silent for a moment, and that alone surprised him. Helen never hesitated. She was the most decisive person he knew, the one person whose judgment he trusted implicitly. Then she said, I might have someone. Joseph spun around. Who? My roommate. Monica Fowler. Joseph's expression darkened. I don't do blind dates, Helen. And I certainly don't bring strangers to family weddings where every word will be analyzed. She's not a stranger, Helen countered, stepping closer. She's smart, grounded, and adaptable. She grew up middle class, but she knows how to hold her own in any room. And... Helen paused, her voice softening. She desperately needs a break right now. Joseph's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Her landlord just raised the rent by 30%. Her job cut her hours. She's working 3 freelance gigs just to stay afloat. Helen met his gaze steadily. Monica is broke, Joseph. Really, truly broke. But more importantly, she's real in a way your family has never encountered. And that's exactly what you need. Joseph pinched the bridge of his nose. I can't parade your struggling roommate in front of my family. They will eat her alive. That's where you're wrong, Helen said, a hint of steel in her voice. Monica won't play by their rules. She'll be herself, unfiltered, honest, human. And that's the one thing your family can't predict. It's the one thing they can't destroy. Joseph stared at her, his mind racing through scenarios, objections, risks. Everything in him screamed to find another solution, someone polished and predictable. But the clock was ticking, and options were running out. Finally, he exhaled. Fine. Arrange a meeting. Helen's lips curved into the smallest smile. I'll text her now. Tonight, 7 o'clock. The Eldridge Hotel ballroom. Make sure she understands what she's walking into, Joseph added, his voice quieter now. 4 days with my family isn't a vacation. It's survival. I'll brief her, Helen promised, already typing on her phone as she left the office. Joseph turned back to the skyline, his reflection staring back at him in the glass. Tailored suit, perfect posture, the image of control. But beneath it all, he felt something unfamiliar stirring. Uncertainty. He'd built his entire life on calculated risks and predictable outcomes. But bringing Monica Fowler into his world? That was chaos. That was reckless. That was the one thing Joseph Prater never allowed himself to be. And yet somehow, he just agreed to it anyway. The Eldridge Hotel ballroom glowed like something from another era. Golden chandeliers cast pools of warm light across polished marble floors, while floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting everything in shades of amber and rose gold. Soft classical music drifted through the air, mingling with a low murmur of well-dressed patrons scattered throughout the space. Joseph arrived 20 minutes early. He always did. He claimed a corner table that offered both privacy and a commanding view of the entrance, ordered a Scotch neat, and tried to ignore the unfamiliar tension coiling in his chest. This was just a business transaction. A problem that needed solving. He'd approached it the same way he approached everything, with logic, preparation, and control. So why did his hand keep adjusting his cufflinks? He told himself it was the stakes. 4 days with his family. 4 days of scrutiny, judgment, and the barely concealed disappointment in his mother's eyes every time she looked at him. He needed this to work. Needed Monica Fowler to be convincing enough to deflect the inevitable interrogations. That was all this was. At precisely 7 o'clock, the ballroom doors opened. And Joseph's entire world tilted. Monica Fowler didn't walk into the room, she commanded it without even trying. Her emerald gown hugged her curves before flowing elegantly to the floor, the fabric catching the light with every step. Long satin gloves stretched past her elbows, and diamond drop earrings sparkled against her brown skin, which seemed to shimmer under the chandeliers. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant style that showcased the graceful line of her neck. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Wide with something between shock and determination, they scanned the room until they landed on him. For a moment, just a heartbeat, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition of something she hadn't expected to feel. Joseph stood automatically, his scotch forgotten. She approached with measured grace, her posture impeccable, and he found himself cataloging details he had no business noticing. The confidence in her stride, the way she didn't fidget with her clutch, the directness of her gaze as she met his eyes without flinching. When she reached the table, she extended one gloved hand, and the first words out of her mouth obliterated every assumption he'd made. Monica Fowler, she said, her voice warm but edged with something sharp. The broke roommate. In the flesh. Joseph blinked. Then, despite himself, felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Joseph Prater. The desperate billionaire. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Self-awareness. Didn't expect that. I'm full of surprises, he replied, gesturing to the seat across from him. Monica settled into her chair with the kind of ease that came from someone who'd learned to adapt anywhere, and Joseph signaled the server. She ordered champagne, not to impress him, he sensed, but because she genuinely wanted it. When they were alone again, she leaned back slightly, studying him with an intensity that should have made him uncomfortable. It didn't. Instead, it felt like being seen for the first time in years. So, Monica said, her tone conversational but her eyes calculating. Helen gave me the basics. You need someone to play your girlfriend at a family wedding. 4 days. Connecticut estate. Old money, new tech, and a whole lot of judgment. That's the situation, Joseph confirmed. And you chose me because... Helen suggested you. That's not an answer. Joseph paused, caught off guard by her directness. Women in his circles rarely pushed back. They smiled, agreed, maneuvered. They didn't challenge. I need someone real, he said finally. Someone who won't be intimidated by my family, but also won't try to, he stopped, searching for the right words. Won't try to trap you into something permanent? Monica finished, amusement dancing in her eyes. Don't worry, Mr. Prater. I'm not looking for a husband. I'm looking for rent money. The bluntness should have been off-putting. Instead, Joseph found himself fighting back a smile. You don't believe in subtlety, do you? Life's too short, Monica said, taking a sip of her champagne. Helen said you'd pay me to pretend we're dating. Let's skip the polite fiction and talk terms. Joseph leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. In boardrooms, he was the one who controlled negotiations, who set the terms and watched others scramble to meet them. But Monica Fowler wasn't scrambling. She was sitting across from him like an equal, and something about that shift in dynamic sent electricity down his spine. What do you want to know? He asked. Everything, Monica said. What's the cover story? What do you expect from me? And most importantly, her eyes sharpened. What are the boundaries? Joseph outlined the basics: the welcome dinner Friday night, various wedding activities Saturday, the ceremony and reception Sunday, farewell brunch Monday. They'd need a backstory, something simple, believable. How they met, how long they'd been seeing each other, enough detail to satisfy curiosity without inviting deeper scrutiny. Monica listened intently, occasionally asking sharp questions that revealed exactly how intelligent Helen had said she was. When he finished, she set down her glass and leaned forward. Here's the thing, Joseph. Can I call you Joseph? He nodded, surprised by how much he wanted to hear his name in her voice again. I'll do this, Monica continued. But I have conditions. Joseph raised an eyebrow. You're negotiating with me? You're hiring me, aren't you? That makes this a transaction. And I don't sign onto anything without terms. She held up one gloved finger. First, I wear what I want. Helen mentioned you'd want to provide wardrobe. Fine. But I have final say on what I actually put on my body. I won't be your dress-up doll. Joseph opened his mouth to object, then stopped. She had a point. Agreed. Second, another finger. I don't pretend to be someone I'm not. I'll be polite, I'll be appropriate, but I won't adopt some fake personality to please your family. You want real? You get real. That's what I'm paying for, Joseph said quietly. Third, Monica's expression sobered. If your family crosses a line, and Helen warned me they might, I reserve the right to walk away. I'll be respectful, but I won't be anyone's punching bag. Not even for $10,000. The number hung in the air between them. Joseph had expected shock when Helen mentioned compensation, maybe some negotiation. But Monica stated it like a fact, like she knew exactly what her dignity was worth. Those are your terms? He asked. Those are my non-negotiables. Joseph studied her for a long moment. No woman had ever negotiated with him like this. In his world, people bent, adjusted, accommodated. They didn't set boundaries. They didn't demand respect as a condition of engagement. Monica Fowler wasn't like anyone in his world. And that terrified him almost as much as it exhilarated him. Agreed, he said finally, extending his hand across the table. Monica's gloved hand met his, her grip firm and sure. Then we have a deal, Mr. Prater. But neither of them let go. The handshake lingered, 3 seconds, then 4, then 5, and Joseph felt something shift in the air between them, something electric and dangerous and completely unplanned. Her eyes widened slightly, surprise flickering across her face, and he knew she felt it too. This spark. This pull. This thing that had nothing to do with contracts or compensation or carefully constructed arrangements. When Monica finally withdrew her hand, her expression had shifted into something more guarded, and Joseph felt the loss of contact like a physical thing. We should discuss logistics, she said, her voice slightly breathless. When do I need to be ready? Joseph cleared his throat, trying to refocus. Friday morning. I'll send a car at 9. We'll drive up together. It's about 2 hours to the estate. 2 hours in a car, Monica murmured. Plenty of time to get our story straight. And for you to back out if you change your mind. Her eyes met his again, direct and unwavering. I don't change my mind once I commit to something, Joseph. When I give my word, I keep it. Something about the way she said it, the quiet certainty, the steel beneath the elegance, made Joseph believe her completely. Then I'll see you Friday, he said. Monica stood, gathering her clutch, and Joseph rose automatically. As she turned to leave, she paused, glancing back over her shoulder. For what it's worth, she said softly, I don't think you're desperate. I think you're scared. There's a difference. Before he could respond, she walked away, her emerald gown trailing behind her like water, leaving Joseph standing alone at the table with his untouched scotch and the unsettling realization that Monica Fowler had seen through him in under an hour. And somehow, that didn't bother him at all. Wednesday morning arrived with rain streaking down the windows of Joseph's office, the city below shrouded in gray mist. He'd scheduled a briefing session, 2 hours to prepare Monica for what she'd face at the estate. Keep it professional, he'd told himself. Clinical. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. Then Monica walked in wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair in a ponytail, looking nothing like the polished woman from the Eldridge, and somehow even more beautiful for it. Morning, she said cheerfully, dropping her bag on the conference table. Helen said you wanted to run through the game plan? Joseph gestured to the chair across from him, a thick folder already positioned in front of it. I've prepared dossiers on the key family members you'll meet. Names, relationships, topics to avoid. Monica picked up the folder, flipped through a few pages, then set it down with a soft thud. You made flashcards for your family? Background information, Joseph corrected stiffly. My mother is particular about. Joseph. Monica's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not studying for an exam. These are people, not chess pieces. These people will dissect every word you say. Then I'll speak carefully. She leaned back in her chair, studying him with those unervingly direct eyes. But I won't memorize talking points like a robot. That's not real, and you said you wanted real. Joseph opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right, and he hated that she was right. The office door opened, and Helen entered carrying her tablet and 2 coffees. Good, you're both here. Let's make this efficient. She handed Monica a coffee, the right order, Joseph noticed, which meant they discussed this, and pulled up a chair. Okay, Helen began, all business. The welcome dinner Friday night. 25 guests. Joseph's parents, Edmund and Catherine Prater. His brother Marcus, the groom, and his fiancée Amanda Chun. Various aunts, uncles, cousins. Monica, you'll be seated next to Joseph's mother. Monica's eyebrows rose. Trial by fire? Catherine likes to assess, Helen said diplomatically. She interrogates, Joseph muttered. She'll ask about your family, your education, your intentions. My intentions? Monica's laugh was sudden and bright, filling the sterile office with unexpected warmth. What is this, a Victorian novel? Should I prepare a dowry? Despite himself, Joseph felt his lips twitch. She's old-fashioned. She's a snob, Helen corrected bluntly. But Monica, if you handle her well, the rest of the family falls in line. Catherine is the gatekeeper. For the next hour, Helen walked Monica through the family dynamics, who was allied with whom, which topics were landmines, the unspoken hierarchies that governed every interaction. Monica listened intently, asking sharp questions that revealed she was tracking not just the facts but the emotional currents beneath them. So Marcus is the golden child, Monica said slowly, and you're the black sheep who chose business over the family legacy? Joseph stiffened. I didn't choose. Your father wanted you to join the family law firm, Monica continued, her tone matter-of-fact. You went into tech investing instead. And he's never forgiven you. The silence that followed was heavy. Helen glanced between them, then quietly excused herself, murmuring something about checking on car arrangements. When they were alone, Monica's expression softened. I'm sorry. That was too direct. No, Joseph said quietly. It was accurate. He stood, moving to the windows, needing distance from those perceptive eyes. Rain continued to fall, blurring the city into watercolor streaks. My father built his career on tradition. Old money, old connections, old ways of doing things. When I chose a different path, he trailed off. He saw it as betrayal, Monica finished. Joseph turned, surprised. How did you? Because I know what it's like to disappoint people who think they own your future. Monica's voice was soft but edged with old pain. My parents had plans for me too. Safe plans. Predictable plans. And when life fell apart and those plans became impossible, she shrugged. They couldn't forgive me for not being who they needed me to be. Something shifted in Joseph's chest, a recognition he hadn't expected. The 2008 crash. Monica nodded. We lost everything. The house, the savings, the social circle. Turns out most of our friends were only interested in us when we had money. Her smile was sad. I learned early that wealth doesn't equal worth. And that the people who measure you by your bank account aren't worth knowing. Joseph studied her, really studied her, and saw beneath the humor and confidence to the wound she carried, the resilience she'd built from rubble. She understood his world not because she'd conquered it, but because she'd survived losing it. That's why you set boundaries, he said quietly. Why you won't be anyone's punching bag. I've been invisible before, Monica replied. I won't be again. The rain fell harder, and the silence between them shifted from uncomfortable to something else. Something charged. We should rehearse, Joseph said, his voice rougher than intended. Our story. How we met. Monica stood, moving closer, and Joseph's pulse kicked up without permission. Okay. Where did we meet? A charity gala. 3 months ago. You were there with Helen. Why was I at a charity gala if I'm broke? Joseph blinked. He hadn't thought that far. You. Helen had an extra ticket. Monica shook her head, amused. Try again. Real details, Joseph. Why would I actually be there? He forced himself to think beyond the script. You were commissioned to create illustrations for the charity's children's program. Monica's face lit up. Yes. That works. That's believable. She stepped closer. So you saw me across the room. You were laughing at something Helen said, Joseph continued, surprising himself with how easily the image formed. You had paint on your sleeve, and you didn't care that you were underdressed. You looked. Looked what? Monica's voice was barely above a whisper. Real, Joseph breathed. Like you belonged to yourself, not the room. The air between them crackled. Monica's eyes widened slightly, and Joseph realized how close they were standing, how he could see gold flecks in her brown eyes, how his heart was hammering against his ribs. And then what? Monica asked softly. Then I walked over. Asked what you were drinking. You told me water because champagne gave you hiccups. Monica laughed, breaking the tension. Champagne does give me hiccups. How did you? She stopped, realization dawning. You noticed. At the Eldridge. He had noticed. He'd noticed everything. We talked for an hour, Joseph continued, his voice steadier now. You told me about your work. I told you about a project I was funding. We exchanged numbers. And I called you the next day. Why? Monica challenged, but gently. Joseph hesitated. The script said because I was intrigued. But standing here, watching the way light caught in her eyes, feeling the magnetic pull he couldn't name, the script felt hollow. Because I couldn't stop thinking about you, he said quietly. It was supposed to be part of the story. But the words tasted too true. Monica held his gaze, something vulnerable flickering across her face. Then she stepped back, breaking whatever spell had woven between them. That's good, she said, her voice slightly breathless. That's believable. Joseph cleared his throat, moving back to the table. We should cover your background. Education, family. Joseph. Monica's voice stopped him. Stop. He turned. She was watching him with a mixture of concern and understanding that made his chest tighten. You're trying to script every moment, control every variable. But that's not how people work. That's not how this works. I need to be prepared. You need to breathe, Monica said quietly, crossing to stand in front of him. Your family stresses you. I get it. But memorizing answers and rehearsing responses, that's not going to protect you. It's just going to make you more anxious. Joseph's jaw clenched. You don't understand. I understand that you're terrified, Monica interrupted gently. I understand that you've built walls so high you've forgotten what it feels like to just be with someone, without armor. Her hand lifted, hesitated, then settled gently on his forearm. The touch was light, but it burned through his shirt sleeve. You don't need a script, Joseph, she said, her voice soft but steady. You just need to breathe. The words hit him like a physical blow, cracking something in his carefully constructed defenses. Because she was right. He'd spent so long controlling everything, predicting everything, that he'd forgotten how to simply exist in a moment without orchestrating it. And somehow, this woman he'd known for 3 days could see that. Could see him. Joseph stepped back, her hand falling away, and turned toward the window so she wouldn't see how much her words had rattled him. Friday morning, he said, his voice tight. 9 o'clock. The car will pick you up. Joseph. Thank you for coming today, Ms. Fowler. The formality was a shield, and they both knew it. A long silence. Then Monica's footsteps moved toward the door. But before she left, her voice drifted back, quiet and achingly kind. It's going to be okay. I promise. Then she was gone. And Joseph stood alone in his office, staring at the rain, wondering how a woman he was paying to pretend had just seen through to the truth he'd hidden from everyone else. The Prater estate rose from the Connecticut countryside like a monument to generational wealth. 3 stories of Georgian architecture, manicured grounds stretching toward distant tree lines, and a circular driveway where luxury vehicles gathered like thoroughbreds at a stable. Joseph's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he pulled through the iron gates, feeling the familiar weight settle on his chest. He'd driven himself rather than used the arranged car. Needed the illusion of control. Wow, Monica breathed beside him, staring up at the house. Your family lives here. My parents do. The wedding party is staying in the guest wing. Joseph's voice was tight. There are 15 bedrooms. You'll have your own suite. Monica turned to look at him, and he felt her gaze like a physical touch. Hey. Breathe, remember. His jaw clenched. He'd been trying to forget that moment in his office. The way her words had cracked him open. The 2-hour drive had been filled with careful small talk, both of them dancing around the intimacy that had bloomed between them on Wednesday. I'm fine, he said. You're gripping that steering wheel like it owes you money. Monica's voice was gentle. We can do this. It's just dinner. Just dinner. With his mother's surgical interrogations and his father's disappointed silences and Marcus's barely concealed smugness. Just dinner, where every word would be weighed and judged and found wanting. Just dinner, Joseph echoed hollowly. Monica reached over, her hand covering his on the wheel. Together. Remember? That's the whole point. Before he could respond, a valet appeared at his window. The performance was beginning. Joseph helped Monica from the car, her hand settling into the crook of his arm with practiced ease. She wore a deep burgundy dress, elegant but not ostentatious, Helen's choice, and pearl earrings that caught the late afternoon light. She looked perfect. Appropriate. Exactly what his family expected. Except for her eyes, which held none of the deference they'd demand. The front door opened, and his mother appeared on the threshold. Catherine Prater, 70 years old and regal as a queen, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her expression pleasant in the way sharp objects could be pleasant if one didn't touch the blade. Joseph. Her smile was measured. You're late. Traffic, Joseph lied smoothly, feeling Monica's fingers tighten slightly on his arm, a warning or encouragement he couldn't tell. Catherine's gaze shifted to Monica, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. And you must be the mystery woman we've heard so little about. Monica Fowler. Monica extended her free hand, her smile warm but not obsequious. Thank you for including me in such a special family celebration. Catherine's handshake was brief, perfunctory. How lovely. The pause before the adjective spoke volumes. Do come in. The others are gathering in the drawing room. The interior was exactly as Joseph remembered, all crown molding and oil paintings and furniture that cost more than most people's homes. The drawing room hummed with conversation that died the moment they entered, replaced by the weighted silence of judgment. Heads turned. Whispers started immediately. Who is she? Where did Joseph find her? I heard she's Helen's roommate. How convenient. Monica's posture didn't change, but Joseph felt her awareness sharpen. She scanned the room with the calm assessment of someone who'd learned to read hostile crowds, and something in her expression settled into quiet determination. His brother Marcus approached first, Amanda on his arm. Marcus had inherited their father's height and their mother's cheekbones, plus a confidence that came from never being questioned. Joey finally made it. The childhood nickname was deliberate condescension. Marcus. Amanda. Joseph nodded to his future sister-in-law, who smiled with genuine warmth, the only person in the room who seemed capable of it. This is Monica. It's wonderful to meet you, Amanda said, and meant it. Joseph never brings anyone to family events. You must be special. Or strategic, someone murmured behind them. Monica's smile didn't falter. I'm very lucky to be here. Congratulations on your wedding. Joseph tells me you're getting married at the gazebo where his grandparents exchanged vows. That's incredibly meaningful. Amanda's face lit up. You know about that? Most people don't. Monica asks questions, Joseph said quietly, surprising himself with the pride in his voice. She actually listens to the answers. Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly, but before he could respond, a silver bell chimed. Catherine's voice carried across the room. Dinner is served. The dining room was a study in intimidation, a table that sat 25, crystal that sparkled under an antique chandelier, and place cards arranged with military precision. Joseph found his seat and wasn't surprised to discover Monica positioned directly beside his mother. Trial by fire indeed. As everyone settled, the whispers continued in carefully modulated tones. I heard she's broke. An illustrator, apparently. Children's books. How quaint. Do you think she knows about the prenup? Monica gave no indication she heard any of it. She unfolded her napkin with perfect etiquette, smiled at the server who poured her water, and turned to Catherine with polite interest. Mrs. Prater, your home is stunning. Have you lived here long? Catherine's smile was glacial. 42 years. The estate has been in the Prater family for 6 generations. A pause. We value continuity. Legacy. One might say we're old-fashioned that way. The implication hung in the air like smoke. We value people who belong. People like us. Not people like you. Monica sipped her water thoughtfully. My grandmother used to say that true legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you build that outlasts you. She was a teacher in a one-room schoolhouse. Never had money. But hundreds of her students went on to change lives, all carrying pieces of her wisdom. That struck me as the kind of legacy that matters. The table went silent. Catherine's eyes narrowed. How philosophical. And your family? What do they do? My father was an architect before the recession. My mother was a piano teacher. Monica's voice remained steady, unbowed. They lost their savings in 2008. We lost our home. But they never lost their integrity, and they taught me that who you are matters more than what you have. Another calculated pause from Catherine. Yet here you are, dating a billionaire. How fortunate for you. Joseph's hand clenched on his fork. The insult was clear, the accusation unmistakable, gold digger. Every eye at the table turned to Monica, waiting for her to crumble, to stammer, to prove she didn't belong. Monica set down her glass with deliberate care. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute conviction. Mrs. Prater, I understand your concern for your son. Any mother who loves her child would want to protect them. But I need you to understand something. She met Catherine's gaze directly, unflinching. I agreed to be here this weekend because Joseph asked, and because I believe in honoring commitments. Not because of his money. Not because of his name. But because he's someone worth knowing, not for what he has, but for who he is beneath all the expectations everyone else has placed on him. She paused, letting the words settle. If you want to judge me for where I come from or what I've lost, that's your choice. But don't confuse my circumstances with my character. And don't assume your son needs protecting from someone who actually sees him as a person, not a portfolio. The silence that followed was absolute. Catherine's expression flickered, shock perhaps, or grudging respect. Joseph couldn't tell because he was too busy staring at Monica, his heart hammering against his ribs. No one had ever defended him. Not to his mother. Not in this house. Not with such fierce, uncompromising grace. Amanda broke the silence by clearing her throat. I think that's beautifully said. And I, for one, am thrilled Joseph brought you Monica. We're so glad you're here. Murmured agreements rippled around the table, tentative, uncertain, but present. The conversation gradually resumed, topics shifting to safer ground, but Joseph barely heard any of it. He couldn't stop staring at Monica. The way she held herself, poised and unshakable. The way she'd transformed a verbal assault into a statement of principle. The way she'd seen him, really seen him, and chosen to stand beside him anyway. She glanced over, caught him watching, and her eyes widened slightly. A faint blush colored her cheeks. Across the table, Helen's gaze moved between them, her expression knowing and just slightly amused. She raised her wine glass in the smallest of salutes. Joseph looked away, but his pulse still raced. This was supposed to be an arrangement. A business transaction. 4 days of pretending. But watching Monica face down his mother with dignity and fire, defending him when no one ever had, Joseph felt something shift irreversibly inside his chest. This wasn't pretending anymore. This was dangerously, terrifyingly real. Saturday morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the estate's leaded glass windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny stars. Joseph woke to the sound of voices drifting up from the gardens, wedding preparations in full swing, family members already gathering for the day's activities. He dressed carefully, armor for battle, pressed slacks, crisp shirt, the watch his grandfather had left him. In the mirror, he looked every inch the successful businessman his family expected. But his hands trembled slightly as he fastened his cufflinks. He found Monica on the terrace, coffee in hand, watching the groundskeepers position chairs for tomorrow's ceremony. She wore a simple cream sundress, her hair loose around her shoulders, and something about the peaceful set of her posture made his chest tighten. "Morning," he said quietly. She turned, and her smile hit him like sunlight. "Hey. Survived the night?" "Barely." He moved to stand beside her, accepting the coffee she'd somehow known to pour for him. "Thank you." For last night. What you said to my mother was true, Monica interrupted gently. Every word. Joseph stared into his coffee, not trusting himself to respond. The gratitude felt too big, too raw to put into words. Come on, Monica said, setting down her cup. Your mother cornered me earlier. Apparently there's a family walk through the gardens before lunch. We should probably make an appearance. The morning unfolded in a series of small moments that Joseph would replay later, unable to pinpoint when exactly everything shifted. The grand staircase. The estate's main staircase was a sweeping marvel of marble and mahogany, designed to impress but treacherous in heels. Monica descended carefully, one hand trailing the banister, and Joseph found himself instinctively stepping closer. I've got you, he murmured, offering his arm. Her hand settled into the crook of his elbow, and the contact sent electricity up his spine. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just present. Real. Like her touch was becoming a language his body understood without translation. My hero, she said lightly, but her fingers tightened slightly when her heel caught on a step. Joseph steadied her automatically, his other hand moving to her waist. For a heartbeat they stood frozen, her body warm against his side, her face turned up to his, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her eyes. Steady. His voice came out rougher than intended. Steady, she breathed. Neither of them moved immediately. Joseph. Monica. Amanda's voice called from below. We're waiting. The spell broke. They descended the rest of the stairs in careful silence, but Joseph's palm still burned where it had pressed against her waist. The garden walk. 20 family members strolling through manicured paths, making small talk that felt like diplomatic negotiations. Joseph fell into his usual pattern, polite responses, measured smiles, the performance he'd perfected over decades. Then Monica's hand brushed his, and her pinky finger hooked around his for just a second. He glanced at her questioningly. She leaned in, her voice barely audible. Your cousin just asked if you're still playing around with computers. I'm dying not to laugh. Joseph's lips twitched. His tech investment firm managed $12 billion in assets, and Gregory still called it playing around with computers. Breathe, Monica whispered, echoing his own advice back at him. And somehow, impossibly, the knot in his chest loosened. They fell into step together, and Monica began narrating the garden in whispered commentary. Hedge maze at 3 o'clock. $10 says someone gets lost. Oh look, your aunt is wearing a hat that's basically a bird sanctuary. Is that a flamingo? That's definitely a flamingo. Joseph found himself fighting back laughter, something he never did at family events. Monica noticed, her eyes dancing with mischief, and continued her commentary until he had to fake a coughing fit to hide his smile. The lunch. His father joined them, Edmund Prater, 75 and imposing despite his age, a man who'd built his legacy on being unmovable. He sat across from Joseph and Monica, his expression carefully neutral. Joseph tells me you're doing well, Edmund said, though his tone suggested obligation rather than interest. The firm is performing above projections, Joseph replied, the response automatic. Edmund nodded once, then turned his attention to Marcus, asking detailed questions about the wedding, the honeymoon, the future. Engaging. Present. Everything he'd never been with Joseph. Under the table, Monica's hand found Joseph's knee. Not demanding attention, just there. Grounding him. He glanced at her. She wasn't looking at him, was nodding along to something Amanda was saying, but her thumb moved in small circles against his leg. Comfort. Solidarity. She noticed, he realized with sudden clarity. She saw him tense, saw his father's dismissal, and she's telling me I'm not alone. Something cracked open in his chest. The afternoon. Monica excused herself after lunch, claiming exhaustion, and Joseph found himself tracking her absence like a physical ache. He suffered through a tedious discussion about investment strategies with his uncle, then finally escaped to find her. She wasn't in her room. He searched the estate methodically, the sitting rooms, the terrace, the conservatory, growing increasingly concerned until Helen found him in the hallway. She's in the library, Helen said, her expression knowing. 3rd floor, east wing. I wasn't. You were absolutely looking for her, Helen interrupted, amused. And Joseph? Whatever this is becoming. Don't fight it too hard. She walked away before he could respond. The library. He found Monica curled in a leather armchair, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, reading a first edition of The Secret Garden. Late afternoon light poured through the windows, turning her hair to burnished gold, and Joseph stopped in the doorway, arrested by the sight. She looked up, startled. Hey. I hope it's okay, I just needed some quiet. Of course. He moved into the room, drawn by gravity he couldn't name. That's a valuable book. I'm being careful, Monica promised, closing it gently. But I couldn't resist. My grandmother read this to me when I was little. Before. She trailed off. Before you lost everything, Joseph finished quietly. Monica nodded. She died right after. I think the stress of losing the house. She swallowed hard. I never got to say goodbye properly. Joseph sat in the chair across from hers, the confession pulling him closer. My grandfather died the day I told my father I wasn't joining the family firm. He had a heart attack in his study. My father blamed me. The words fell out before he could stop them, words he'd never spoken aloud to anyone. Monica's eyes widened. Joseph. He never said it directly, but I could see it in his eyes. Every time he looked at me afterward, I was the grandson who'd killed his father with disappointment. That's not true, Monica said fiercely, leaning forward. That's guilt he placed on you because he couldn't process his own grief. Maybe. Joseph's throat felt tight. But I still carry it. Every family gathering, every conversation, every time he looks through me instead of at me, I'm still trying to apologize for choosing myself. Monica set down the book and moved to kneel in front of his chair, her hands covering his. Joseph, listen to me. You didn't kill anyone. You lived your life. That's not betrayal, that's survival. He stared at their joined hands, her warmth seeping into his cold fingers. Why does it feel like betrayal then? Because they made you believe love is conditional, Monica said softly. That you have to earn it by being who they need instead of who you are. But that's not love, Joseph. That's control. The truth of it hit him like a physical blow. All these years, he'd been measuring himself against impossible standards, trying to prove his worth to people who'd already decided he'd failed. I'm so tired, he admitted, the exhaustion suddenly overwhelming. Tired of performing. Tired of trying to be enough. You are enough, Monica said, her voice absolute. Right now. Exactly as you are. You don't have to prove anything. Joseph looked at her, really looked at her, kneeling before him with fierce compassion in her eyes, offering him something no one else ever had, unconditional acceptance. You're the first person who's ever seen me, he said quietly. Not my money. Not my name. Not my potential value. Just me. I like just you, Monica whispered. He's pretty remarkable. The space between them felt charged, heavy with possibility. Joseph's hand lifted, trembling slightly, and traced the curve of her cheek. Monica's breath caught, her eyes falling closed. Monica. Yes. He didn't have words for what he was feeling, gratitude, wonder, terror, need, so he just held her face between his palms and whispered the only truth that mattered. You don't have to be perfect with me either. Monica's eyes opened, shining with unshed tears. What if I'm a mess? Then we'll be messy together, Joseph said. She laughed, the sound breaking on a sob, and surged up to wrap her arms around him. Joseph held her tight, his face buried in her hair, breathing her in like oxygen. They stayed like that as the afternoon light faded to gold, then amber, then dusk. Two people who'd been performing their entire lives finally finding someone they didn't have to pretend for. When Monica finally pulled back, she smiled at him, soft and real and devastating. You don't have to be perfect with me, she said softly. You just have to be you. Joseph couldn't look away. He didn't want to. For the first time in his life, being seen didn't terrify him. It felt like coming home. Sunday morning arrived with deceptive beauty, clear skies, gentle breeze, the estate grounds transformed into something from a fairy tale. White chairs lined the lawn in perfect rows, flowers adorned every surface, and the gazebo where Joseph's grandparents had married 60 years ago gleamed with fresh paint and trailing roses. The wedding would begin in 3 hours. Joseph stood at his bedroom window, adjusting his tie for the 4th time, trying to ignore the way his pulse had been racing since he'd woken. Last night in the library had changed something fundamental between him and Monica. The walls he'd spent decades building had crumbled in her hands, and this morning he felt exposed. Vulnerable. Terrified. But also, impossibly, hopeful. A knock at his door pulled him from his thoughts. Helen entered, tablet in hand, her expression carefully neutral. Morning. Monica's getting ready. The stylist just arrived. Your mother wants family photos before the ceremony, so you'll need to be downstairs in 20 minutes. She paused. How are you holding up? Joseph managed a tight smile. I've survived worse than a wedding. Helen's eyes softened. I'm not talking about the wedding, Joseph. He turned away, unable to meet her knowing gaze. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Helen moved closer. Whatever happened between you and Monica yesterday, I saw your face at dinner last night. You looked at her like. She trailed off. Just be careful. With both of your hearts. Before he could respond, she was gone. Joseph exhaled slowly, then headed downstairs to face the day. The pre-ceremony chaos. The estate buzzed with controlled chaos, photographers positioning family members, coordinators barking instructions, guests arriving in luxury vehicles that lined the circular drive. Joseph navigated through it all with practiced detachment, smiling for photos, accepting congratulations for Marcus, playing his role. Then Monica appeared at the top of the stairs. His breath stopped. She wore a flowing gown in soft blush pink, her hair swept up to reveal the elegant line of her neck, and when she descended toward him, the world narrowed to just her, the nervous hope in her eyes, the small smile that curved her lips when she saw him watching. Hi, she said softly when she reached him. Hi. His voice came out rough. You look acceptable, she teased gently. Devastating, he corrected, and watched color bloom in her cheeks. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining naturally, and Joseph felt something settle in his chest. This felt right in a way nothing in his life ever had. Joseph. There you are. His Aunt Diane materialized beside them, champagne already in hand despite the early hour. We need you for family photos. And this must be Monica, we've heard so much about you, dear. The way she said dear carried an edge that put Joseph on alert, but Monica just smiled graciously. It's wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Morrison. Oh, call me Diane. She leaned in conspiratorially, her voice carrying deliberately. Tell me, how exactly did you two meet again? I've heard so many different versions. Monica's hand tensed in Joseph's, but her voice remained steady. At a charity gala. I was commissioned to create illustrations for their children's literacy program. How lovely. And you're an artist full-time. Illustrator, Monica corrected gently. Children's books, primarily. Such a creative field. Diane's smile sharpened. Though I imagine the pay is rather inconsistent. Artists do struggle so, don't they? Joseph's jaw clenched. The implication was clear, deliberate. But before he could intervene, his cousin Gregory joined them, emboldened by alcohol and family allegiance. Oh, come now, Diane. Let's not dance around it. Gregory's laugh was cruel. We're all thinking it. Joseph suddenly shows up with a beautiful woman nobody's ever heard of, who just happens to be his assistant's broke roommate. Right before a major family event where he'd be interrogated about being single. He turned to Monica, his smile vicious. Clever strategy, really. What's the going rate for a wedding date these days? 10,000? 20. The words landed like physical blows. Monica went rigid beside him, her hand turning to ice in his. Around them, nearby conversations stuttered and died. Aunt Diane looked delighted. His mother, standing across the lawn, watched with calculating interest. Joseph's mind went blank. He should defend her. Should shut Gregory down immediately. Should protect the woman who'd stood beside him, defended him, seen him. But the eyes on him, his family's eyes, filled with judgment and expectation, triggered every defense mechanism he'd ever built. The walls slammed back up. The armor locked into place. And instead of protecting Monica, he heard himself say, "This is just business." The words came out clipped, dismissive. Meant to deflect. Meant to shut down the conversation. But they destroyed everything. Monica's hand went limp in his. He felt her recoil as if he'd struck her, felt the moment her trust shattered like glass against marble. "Monica," he started, finally seeing her face. The hurt there was devastating. Betrayal and pain and something that looked heartbreakingly like grief. "Of course," she whispered, her voice hollow. "Business. How could I forget?" She pulled her hand from his, and the loss of contact felt like losing gravity. "I didn't mean," Joseph tried again, but the words stuck in his throat, tangled with panic and regret and the suffocating weight of his family's expectations. Gregory laughed, victorious. "Well, at least we know where we stand." "Nicely done, Joey. Very practical arrangement." "Shut up, Gregory," Joseph snapped, finding his voice too late. But Monica was already backing away, her composure cracking. "Excuse me. I need some air." "Monica, wait." She turned, and the look she gave him was worse than anger. It was disappointment. Recognition. The realization that she'd been wrong about him. "You know what the saddest part is?" Her voice was quiet, but cut deeper than any shout. "For a moment there in the library last night, I actually believed you when you said I could be myself with you. That you saw me. But you don't see anything, Joseph. You're so terrified of disappointing them," she gestured to his family, "that you'll sacrifice anything real to maintain their approval." "That's not fair," Joseph said weakly. "Isn't it?" Monica's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "The second someone questioned my authenticity, you threw me under the bus. You didn't even hesitate. Just reverted straight back to the safe answer, 'This is just business.'" She laughed, but it sounded broken. "Well, congratulations. You've convinced them. You've convinced me, too." "Monica, please." "You can't recognize something real when it's right in front of you," she whispered, and the truth of it hung between them like an accusation. "Because real is messy. Real requires courage. Real means risking their disapproval to protect the people you care about. And you're not brave enough for that." The words hit him like bullets, each one finding its mark. "I care," Joseph started desperately. "No," Monica interrupted, her voice breaking. "You care more about what they think than what I feel. And that tells me everything I need to know." She turned and walked away across the lawn, her blush-pink gown trailing behind her, and Joseph stood frozen, watching her go. Around him, his family resumed their conversations, already moving past the drama. Gregory smirked. Diane looked satisfied. His mother's expression was unreadable. And Joseph stood there, his heart hammering, his hands shaking, feeling like he'd just lost something infinitely precious because he'd been too much of a coward to hold on to it. Helen appeared at his elbow, her voice tight with disappointment. "What did you do?" "I don't know," Joseph whispered, still staring at the spot where Monica had disappeared. "I panicked. I said the wrong thing." "You said the business thing," Helen corrected coldly. "You reduced her to a transaction. After everything she's done for you. After yesterday." She shook her head. "I thought you were better than this, Joseph. I really did." She walked away, leaving Joseph alone in a crowd of his family, feeling more isolated than he'd ever felt in his life. His chest ached. His hands trembled. And for the first time since he'd built his empire, Joseph Prater felt like a complete failure. Not because he'd lost a deal, but because he'd lost her. And the worst part, the part that made breathing difficult, was that she was right. He couldn't recognize real when it was right in front of him. Because real terrified him more than any market crash, any failed negotiation, any disappointed father. Real meant vulnerability. Real meant risk. Real meant choosing someone over his family's approval. And when it mattered most, he'd chosen wrong. Joseph sank onto a nearby bench, his carefully tailored suit suddenly feeling like a costume, his perfect posture crumbling. He buried his face in his hands and tried to breathe past the pain crushing his chest. He'd spent his entire life building walls to protect himself. He'd never realized those walls would also keep out the one person he actually wanted to let in. And now it was too late. Joseph found her in the rose garden. It took him 40 minutes of searching, past the manicured lawns and sculpted hedges, through the pergola dripping with wisteria, beyond the stone fountain where guests were gathering for pre-ceremony champagne. He'd checked everywhere, growing more desperate with each empty space, until finally he glimpsed a flash of blush pink through the trellis at the garden's far edge. Monica stood with her back to him, arms wrapped around herself, staring at a wall of climbing roses like they held answers she couldn't find. Even from 20 feet away, Joseph could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself together through sheer force of will. His heart fractured all over again. Monica. His voice came out raw. She went rigid but didn't turn. Go away, Joseph. I can't. He moved closer, stopped when she flinched. Please. Let me explain. Explain what? She whirled to face him, and the tears streaming down her cheeks destroyed him. Explain how you threw me to the wolves the second it got uncomfortable? Explain how you reduced everything between us to a business transaction in front of your entire family? What exactly do you want to explain, Joseph? Because from where I'm standing, you made yourself perfectly clear. I panicked, he said desperately. Gregory attacked you, and everyone was watching, and I. You froze, Monica interrupted, her voice breaking. You stood there and let them tear me apart, and then you helped them do it. You agreed with them. This is just business. Like I'm some escort you hired for the weekend. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Monica demanded, stepping closer, fury and pain warring in her eyes. Because those were your words, Joseph. Your choice. You could have defended me. You could have told them the truth, that I came here as a favor, that I've been nothing but honest with you, that whatever this is between us is real. But instead, you hid behind money. Again. Like you always do. The accusation stung because it was true. I don't hide behind. Yes, you do. Monica's voice rose, years of her own pain surfacing. You hide behind your wealth, your success, your carefully controlled empire where everything can be bought and sold and negotiated. You hide behind contracts and arrangements because committing to something real terrifies you. And I get it, Joseph. I do. Your family hurt you. Your father's disappointment haunts you. But you can't blame them for your cowardice. I'm not a coward, Joseph shot back, defensive walls slamming up. No. Monica laughed bitterly. Then what do you call someone who throws away something real because he's afraid of what other people might think? What do you call someone who'd rather be alone and approved of than risk being judged for actually caring about someone? I do care. Not enough. Monica's voice cracked. Not enough to stand up for me when it mattered. Not enough to risk your family's precious approval. And that's fine, Joseph. That's your choice. But don't you dare ask me to be your placeholder. Don't ask me to be the woman you pretend to care about when it's convenient and abandon when it gets hard. You're not a placeholder, Joseph said hoarsely. Then what am I? Monica challenged. What was last night in the library? What were all those moments today, your hand on my waist, the way you looked at me like I was the only person in the world? What was any of it, Joseph, if the second your family questions us, you revert to just business? Joseph ran a hand through his hair, frustration and fear tangling in his chest. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to trust that something this good is real. I don't know how to believe that you, he stopped, the words catching. That I what? Monica pressed, tears still falling. Say it. That you actually want to be here. The confession exploded out of him. That you actually see something in me worth staying for beyond the paycheck. That this isn't just an arrangement that'll end the second we leave this estate. I don't know how to trust that any of this is real because nothing in my life has ever been real, Monica. Everything comes with conditions. Everything has a price. And I'm terrified, his voice broke. I'm terrified that you'll realize I'm not worth the trouble and walk away like everyone else. Monica stared at him, something shifting behind her eyes. Everyone else? Joseph's throat tightened. My father. My friends who disappeared when I chose a different path. Every woman I've dated who saw dollar signs instead of me. You're the first person who's ever looked at me and seen something beyond what I can provide. And I'm so afraid of losing that, of losing you, that I sabotaged it before you could leave on your own. That's the most backward logic I've ever heard, Monica whispered. I know. Joseph's laugh was hollow. I know it doesn't make sense. But when Gregory said those things, when everyone was looking at us like we were some kind of fraud, all I could think was that they were right. That you'd eventually realize being with me means dealing with this family, this judgment, this pressure forever. And why would you choose that? Why would anyone choose that when they could walk away? Because you're worth it, Monica said softly, and the words shattered something in Joseph's chest. Or at least, I thought you were. But Joseph, you have to meet me halfway. You have to be brave enough to let me in, not just in private moments when it's safe, but in public. In front of the people who scare you most. You have to trust that I'm strong enough to handle your family's judgment, and you have to be strong enough to stand beside me when they attack. I'm not strong, Joseph admitted, the confession tearing from somewhere deep. Not like you. You faced my mother down at dinner. You challenged every assumption they made. You stood in that ballroom and demanded respect without apology. I don't know how to do that. Yes, you do, Monica countered. You do it in boardrooms every day. You negotiate billion-dollar deals. You command respect from powerful people. But the second it's your family, you become that little boy who just wants his father's approval. She stepped closer. Joseph, you have to decide. Are you going to spend the rest of your life trying to earn love from people who've made it clear their approval is conditional? Or are you going to accept love from someone who sees all your flaws and wants you anyway? Joseph's breath caught. You want me? I did, Monica whispered. I do. But I won't be your secret, Joseph. I won't be the woman you care about in private and dismiss in public. I deserve better than that. And honestly, so do you. The truth hung between them, devastating and clarifying. Joseph stared at her, this woman who'd crashed into his controlled life and dismantled every defense, who'd seen his wounds and chosen gentleness, who'd stood beside him even when it cost her dignity. And he realized, his family's approval would never fill the emptiness inside him. Their validation would never heal his wounds. But Monica, brave, fierce, authentic Monica, she'd made him feel seen in ways he'd never experienced. She'd made him feel whole. And he was about to lose her because he'd been too afraid to choose her. I wasn't afraid they'd judge you, Joseph said suddenly, the words rushing out. I was afraid they'd see how much you matter to me. Monica froze. What? That's why I panicked. Joseph moved closer, his voice raw with honesty. Because when Gregory attacked you, when everyone was watching, I realized they could see it, how much I care about you, how completely you've gotten under my skin, how terrified I am of losing you. And that vulnerability, the dependence on someone else's feelings, it's the one thing my family could destroy me with. So I hid it. I pretended it was business because business is safe. Business doesn't leave you bleeding. Tears spilled down Monica's cheeks. Joseph. But you're not business, he continued desperately. You're the first thing in my life that's ever felt real. You're the first person who's made me want to be brave. And I'm sorry, I'm so sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough in that moment. But I'm here now, and I'm telling you, you matter to me more than their approval. More than their judgment. More than any of this. He gestured to the estate, the wedding, the pristine wealth surrounding them. You make me feel things I can't explain, Joseph whispered. Things I can't control or predict or negotiate. And that terrifies me. But losing you terrifies me more. Monica stood motionless, tears streaming, her eyes searching his face for truth. Joseph's hands trembled. I don't know how to do this perfectly. I'll probably mess up again. But if you give me another chance, I promise I'll choose you. Even when it's hard. Even when they're watching. Especially then. The garden fell silent except for the rustle of wind through roses. Monica's breath hitched. She took one step toward him, then stopped, her expression still guarded. How do I know you won't freeze again? She asked quietly. You don't, Joseph admitted. But I'm asking you to trust me anyway. I'm asking you to let me prove that I'm capable of being the man you believed I could be. A long, trembling moment passed. Then Monica took another step. And another. Until she stood directly in front of him, so close he could see every gold fleck in her tear-filled eyes. Say it, she whispered. Tell me what you want. Joseph's hands lifted, cupping her face with infinite gentleness, thumbs brushing away her tears. The world held its breath. And in a voice that shook with everything he'd never been brave enough to say, Joseph whispered, Stay. For a moment that stretched into eternity, Monica didn't move. She stood within the circle of Joseph's hands, tears still wet on her cheeks, her eyes searching his face with an intensity that made his heart stutter. He'd laid himself bare, every fear, every wound, every desperate hope, and now all he could do was wait. Stay, he'd whispered. The most vulnerable word he'd ever spoken. Monica's breath hitched. Her hand lifted, trembling, and pressed against his chest over his racing heart. You hurt me, she said quietly. I know. His voice broke. I know, and I'm so. But you came after me, she continued, her thumb moving in small circles over his heartbeat. You could have let me leave. Let me disappear after the wedding. Made it easy on yourself. But you came after me. Of course I did. Joseph's hands tightened gently on her face. Monica, you're the only thing that matters. Her eyes shimmered with fresh tears. If I stay, if we do this, I need to know you won't hide me again. That when your family, your world, tries to tear us apart, you'll stand with me. Not behind me, not in front of me. With me. I will, Joseph promised fiercely. I swear to you, I will. Monica studied him for one more endless second. Then she reached for him. Her hand slid up his chest, around his neck, pulling him down as she rose on her toes. Joseph met her halfway, his arms encircling her waist, and when their lips finally met, the world exploded into sensation. The kiss was everything the past 3 days had been building toward, desperate and tender, hungry and healing, filled with all the words they hadn't said and all the feelings they'd tried to deny. Monica's fingers tangled in his hair, and Joseph pulled her closer, impossibly closer, trying to communicate through touch what he couldn't articulate with language. I see you. I choose you. I'm sorry. I'm terrified. I'm falling. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Joseph pressed his forehead to hers, his hand still framing her face like she was something precious he'd finally learned to hold. We're going to miss the ceremony, Monica whispered, but she was smiling through her tears. I don't care, Joseph murmured, kissing her again, softer this time, sweeter like a promise. Yes, you do. Monica laughed, the sound breaking the remaining tension between them. Your brother is getting married, and your mother will murder us both if we're late. Joseph groaned, but couldn't stop smiling. I really don't like how right you are. Get used to it, Monica teased, then sobered. Joseph, are we really doing this? No more pretending. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. No more pretending. This is real. You're real. And I'm done hiding it. Hand in hand, they hurried back through the gardens toward the ceremony site. The ceremony. They arrived just as the processional music swelled. Guests turned, whispers following their entrance, but Joseph didn't let go of Monica's hand. He guided her to their seats in the third row, settled beside her, and kept their fingers intertwined on the armrest between them. His mother's eyebrows rose from her position in the front row. Aunt Diane looked scandalized. Gregory smirked like he'd won something. Joseph didn't care. The ceremony itself was beautiful, Marcus and Amanda exchanging vows under the rose-covered gazebo, the late afternoon sun casting everything in golden light. But Joseph barely heard the words. He was too aware of Monica beside him, the warmth of her hand in his, the way she leaned slightly into his shoulder during the vows. When the officiant declared Marcus and Amanda married, applause erupted. Joseph clapped dutifully, but his attention remained on Monica, who was wiping away happy tears. "You're a romantic," he murmured. She glanced at him, eyes still shining. "Is that a problem?" "Not even a little." He lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles, not caring who saw. Monica's breath caught, and the look she gave him, soft and wondering and full of hope, made every second of the past 3 days worth it. The reception. The reception transformed the estate's grand ballroom into something from a fairy tale. Thousands of candles, cascading flowers, a live orchestra playing as guests mingled and champagne flowed. Joseph and Monica entered together, and this time when heads turned, Joseph pulled her closer instead of retreating. Helen found them immediately, relief flooding her expression. "Thank God. I thought you'd blown it completely." "He almost did," Monica said, but she was smiling. "But he fixed it?" Helen asked hopefully. Joseph met Monica's eyes. "I'm trying to." "He's trying," Monica confirmed, squeezing his hand. Helen exhaled. "Good. Because I really didn't want to find a new billionaire boss. They're surprisingly hard to replace." She winked and disappeared into the crowd. The dinner was a blur of courses and toasts, but Joseph remained hyper-aware of Monica beside him, the way she laughed at Amanda's father's speech, the way her hand found his knee under the table during particularly tense moments, the way she fit seamlessly into conversations without diminishing herself. Then came the best man's speech. Joseph's speech. He stood on trembling legs, champagne glass in hand, and faced the 200 guests watching expectantly. His prepared remarks sat in his jacket pocket, safe, appropriate, exactly what his family expected. He left them there. "Marcus," Joseph began, his voice steadier than he felt. "When we were kids, you were everything I wasn't. Confident. Charming. The son Dad actually wanted at Sunday dinners." Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the crowd. "I spent years resenting you for being perfect. For fitting in where I couldn't. For making it look easy when I struggled with every expectation placed on me." Marcus's expression shifted from surprise to something vulnerable. Joseph continued, "But this weekend, watching you with Amanda, I finally understood something. You weren't perfect. You were just brave enough to be yourself and let someone love you for it. You didn't try to be what everyone else needed. You just were. And Amanda saw that and chose you. Not the performance. Not the perfection. Just you." His voice caught, and he sought Monica's eyes across the room. She was watching him with tears streaming down her face, her hand pressed to her heart. "That's what real love is," Joseph said softly. "Someone who sees all your flaws, all your wounds, all your fears, and stays anyway. Someone who makes you want to be braver than you are. Someone who reminds you that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy of being chosen." He raised his glass, his gaze still locked on Monica. "So here's to Marcus and Amanda. And here's to the rest of us finding the courage to let ourselves be seen. To choosing real over perfect. To being brave enough to love and be loved exactly as we are." The room erupted in applause, but Joseph barely heard it. He set down his glass and moved through the crowd to Monica, who met him halfway. "That was beautiful," she whispered. "That was terrifying," he admitted. "You were perfect." "I was honest." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "Because of you." The orchestra began playing, and couples moved to the dance floor. Joseph extended his hand. "Dance with me." Monica's smile was radiant. "I thought you'd never ask." He led her onto the floor, pulled her close, and as they swayed to the music, everything else fell away. The judgmental relatives, the whispers, the expectations, none of it mattered anymore. "Joseph," Monica murmured against his shoulder. "Everyone's watching." "Good," he said simply. She pulled back to look at him, surprised. Good. Joseph stopped dancing. In the middle of the floor with 200 guests watching, he took Monica's face in his hands and kissed her, slow and deep and utterly unambiguous. When they broke apart, the ballroom had gone silent. Then someone, Amanda, Joseph thought, started clapping. Others joined. Soon applause filled the space, genuine and warm. Joseph ignored all of it. He simply took Monica's hand, intertwining their fingers, and held it up between them where everyone could see. A silent announcement. No more pretending. No more hiding. No more just business. This was real. Monica's eyes filled with tears again, but she was laughing. You're making quite a statement. I'm done being afraid, Joseph said quietly. I'm done caring more about their approval than your happiness. Than my own happiness. The music resumed. They returned to dancing, but something fundamental had shifted. Joseph's posture was easier, his smile more genuine. Monica glowed with a happiness that seemed to light her from within. They danced through 3 songs, laughing at Joseph's tendency to count steps, teasing each other about Monica's predictions coming true. I told you your family would survive you being happy, stealing kisses between movements. Later, they found themselves on the terrace, away from the crowd, stars emerging in the darkening sky. Can I tell you something? Monica asked, leaning against the stone railing. Anything. When Helen first suggested this arrangement, I thought it would be easy money. 4 days of pretending, then back to my regular life. She turned to face him. I never expected you. Joseph moved closer, his hands settling on her waist. I never expected you either. I thought I could control this. Keep it professional. Keep it safe. And now I know that the best things in life are the ones you can't control. He kissed her forehead. The ones that terrify you into becoming someone better than you were. Monica's arms wrapped around him. So what happens when we leave tomorrow? When this weekend ends? It doesn't end, Joseph said firmly. The arrangement ends. The pretending ends. But us? We're just beginning. You sound very certain. I am. He pulled back to meet her eyes. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You changed everything, Monica. And I'm not letting that go. She smiled, bright and beautiful and real. Good. Because neither am I. They kissed under the stars, with music drifting from the ballroom and laughter echoing across the grounds. And for the first time in his life, Joseph Prater felt completely, utterly free. Free to be seen. Free to be flawed. Free to be loved exactly as he was. And it was more valuable than any empire he'd ever built. Joseph woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the sound of Monica humming in the kitchen. For a moment, disoriented, he forgot where he was. Then memory flooded back, and a smile curved his lips. Monica's apartment. Their 5th overnight stay this month. He'd offered dozens of times to move her into his penthouse, with its panoramic views and designer everything. She'd refused every time, insisting they take things slow, figure out what them meant before making grand gestures. 6 months in, and they were still figuring it out. But God, what a beautiful process it was. Joseph found her in the tiny kitchen, barefoot in one of his dress shirts, swaying to music only she could hear as she flipped pancakes. The morning light turned her skin to gold, and something in his chest expanded so suddenly he had to pause in the doorway just to breathe through it. You're staring, Monica said without turning around. You're beautiful, Joseph replied simply. She glanced over her shoulder, her smile soft. Flattery will get you extra pancakes. Then you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, he said, moving behind her to wrap his arms around her waist. Stunning. Breathtaking. A vision. Monica laughed, the sound filling the small space with warmth. Okay. You've earned the chocolate chips. He kissed her neck, then her shoulder, then the spot behind her ear that always made her shiver. What if I want more than chocolate chips? Then you're going to let me finish cooking before the smoke alarm goes off again. She hip-checked him gently. Coffee's ready. Go sit. Joseph obeyed, but not before stealing one more kiss. The past 6 months had been a revelation. Not the dramatic, explosive kind, but the slow, steady unfolding of two people learning how to be themselves together. Learning how to love without performing. The growth. It hadn't been easy. There were arguments, real ones, where voices rose and tears fell and old wounds surfaced. Like the night Joseph had worked until 2 a.m. for the third time that week, and Monica had finally exploded about feeling invisible. Or the weekend Monica had shut down completely when her illustration contract fell through, and Joseph's attempts to fix it with money only made things worse. But they'd learned to fight better. Joseph learned that Monica didn't need solutions. She needed to be heard. That sometimes the best support was sitting beside her in silence while she processed, not throwing resources at problems. Monica learned that Joseph's work wasn't about avoiding her, it was about the control he'd spent a lifetime depending on. That when he withdrew, it wasn't rejection but self-protection, a pattern they were gently dismantling together. They went to therapy. Separately at first, then together. Joseph sat in a therapist's office and talked about his father's disappointment for the first time in his adult life. Monica unpacked her family's financial collapse and how it had shaped every relationship since. Slowly, deliberately, they healed. The transformation. Helen noticed the changes first. "You're different," she'd said 3 months in, watching Joseph actually leave the office at 6 p.m. Softer. More human. Joseph had laughed. "I've always been human." "Debatable," Helen had replied, but she was smiling. "Whatever Monica's doing, tell her to keep doing it." What Monica was doing was simply existing in his space without requiring him to be anything other than himself. She saw him stressed and brought him tea instead of advice. She celebrated his wins without measuring her worth against his success. She challenged him when he reverted to old patterns, the emotional withdrawal, the tendency to control through money, but always with love, never judgment. And Joseph found himself becoming someone he actually liked. He laughed more. Easily, without calculation. He called his brother twice a month. They'd never be close, but the relationship was no longer defined solely by resentment. He even had dinner with his parents, where Catherine had grudgingly admitted that Monica was surprisingly suitable. High praise, from her. Monica had transformed too. The constant anxiety about money had eased, not because Joseph paid her bills, though he tried, she always refused, but because her career had stabilized. Her children's book illustrations had caught the attention of a major publisher, leading to a 3-book deal that made her financially secure for the first time in years. But more than that, she'd learned to accept support without shame. When her laptop died, she let Joseph replace it. When she needed a quiet space to work, she used his penthouse office without feeling guilty. When her childhood insecurities surfaced, the voice that whispered she didn't deserve this, didn't belong in his world, she talked about it instead of running. They were building something neither had experienced before, a partnership of equals. The conversation. That morning, over chocolate chip pancakes and coffee, Monica was quieter than usual. Joseph noticed, he always noticed now, but waited. She'd speak when ready. Finally, setting down her fork, she said, "I've been thinking." "Dangerous," Joseph teased gently. Monica's smile was fleeting. "I've been staying here more. You've been staying at my place. We're basically living in 2 apartments, and it's..." She trailed off. Joseph's chest tightened. "It's what?" "Inefficient," Monica finished, but her eyes held something deeper. "We're building a life together, but we're doing it in spaces that belong to our old lives. Your penthouse is beautiful, but it's yours, designed for who you were before. My apartment is full of memories from when I was broke and scared." Joseph reached across the table, covering her hand. "What are you saying?" Monica took a breath. "Maybe it's time we find a place that's ours." The words hung in the air, simple but monumental. Joseph stared at her, emotions crashing through him, relief, joy, gratitude, love so overwhelming it threatened to choke him. He'd been waiting for this. Hoping for it. Terrified to ask because he didn't want to push, didn't want to mess up the beautiful thing they were building. "I've been waiting for you to say that," he whispered. Monica's eyes widened. You have. For 3 months, Joseph admitted. But I didn't want to pressure you. Didn't want you to feel like I was trying to control anything or rush you into. Monica stood, moved around the table, and kissed him quiet. You're rambling. I'm nervous, he corrected against her lips. Why? Because this means you're choosing this. Us. Not just for now, but... He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the hope that had taken root in his chest. Forever, Monica finished softly. I'm choosing us forever, Joseph. If you'll have me. He pulled her onto his lap, buried his face in her neck, and breathed her in. I'll have you. Any way you'll let me. For as long as you'll stay. Then let's find our home, Monica whispered. Together. The home. 2 weeks later, they stood in an empty Brooklyn brownstone, sunlight streaming through tall windows, illuminating hardwood floors and exposed brick. It wasn't the biggest property they'd toured. Wasn't the most expensive. But the moment they'd walked through the door, both had felt it. This was theirs. The kitchen is huge, Monica said, running her hand along the marble countertop. I could actually cook real meals here. You could have a studio upstairs, Joseph added, already envisioning the space. The light is perfect. They moved through the room slowly, imagining their future into empty spaces. Monica's books lining the built-in shelves. Joseph's grandfather's desk in the study. A garden in the back where they could have coffee on Sunday mornings. A home. Not his. Not hers. Theirs. They ended up in the master bedroom, standing before floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a tree-lined street. Monica leaned back against Joseph's chest, his arms wrapped around her waist, and for a long moment they simply stood there, breathing impossibility. Can you see it? Monica asked quietly. Our life here. Yeah, Joseph murmured. I can see everything. Monica turned in his arms, her expression suddenly vulnerable. Are you sure? This is a big step. And I know your penthouse. Isn't home, Joseph interrupted gently. It was never home. It was just where I lived. But this, he gestured to the empty room, the space waiting to be filled with their shared life. This is where I want to build something real. With you. Tears shimmered in Monica's eyes. You've changed so much. From that man in the ballroom who couldn't even admit we mattered. You changed me, Joseph said, cupping her face. You walked into my controlled, perfect, empty life and refused to let me hide. You demanded I be real. Be vulnerable. Be human. And now I can't imagine going back to who I was before. You're who you always were, Monica corrected. I just helped you remember. Joseph shook his head slowly. No. You didn't just help me survive my family. You didn't just teach me to be brave. His voice dropped to a whisper. You changed my entire life. Monica's breath caught. Joseph. I spent 36 years building walls, he continued. Protecting myself from disappointment and rejection by never letting anyone close enough to matter. I had money, success, respect, everything except the one thing that actually makes life worth living. He pressed his forehead to hers. Then you stood in my office and negotiated with me like I was just a person. You defended me to my mother. You sat with me in the library and held my wounds with such gentleness I finally believed they could heal. You showed me that being seen isn't terrifying, it's the only thing that makes us whole. Tears spilled down Monica's cheeks. You did the same for me. I'd convinced myself I didn't deserve stability. That anyone who wanted me must have ulterior motives. You taught me that love doesn't have to be earned, it can just be given. Freely. Completely. Joseph kissed her softly. So let's give it to each other. Here. In this home that's ours. Let's build the life we both deserve. Monica smiled through her tears. Yeah. Let's do that. They stood in their empty bedroom, holding each other as afternoon light painted golden patterns on the floor, and made silent promises. To be brave together. To fight fair and love fierce. To build a home not on perfection, but on truth. To choose each other, every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Outside, the city hummed with life. Somewhere, Joseph's empire continued operating. Monica's career flourished. The world kept spinning. But here, in this moment, in this empty room filled with possibility, two people who'd started as strangers bound by an arrangement had found something neither had been looking for. A love that transformed them both. A partnership built on seeing and being seen. A home, not made of walls and windows, but of courage and commitment and the choice to keep showing up, keep being honest, keep loving even when fear whispered to run. Joseph pulled Monica closer, breathed in her scent, and felt peace settle in his chest where anxiety used to live. He was home. Finally, completely home.
And that, my beautiful family, is how a man who thought he had everything realized he had nothing without authenticity. Joseph built an empire of glass, power, pride, and walls so high no one could reach him. But it took one quiet woman, a broke roommate named Monica, to show him that real worth isn't found in wealth or titles, but in the courage to care. She lost everything and still chose grace. He had everything and finally chose heart. 3 months later, on a quiet Saturday morning in their new home, Joseph woke to find Monica already awake, sketching in bed beside him. She was illustrating a story of a prince and an artist building a castle together. A beautiful castle, uneven, with flowers growing wild, perfect in its imperfection. It was the story of them. Joseph pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. Best story I've ever been part of. Monica curled into him, fitting perfectly against his side like she'd always belonged there. Because she had. Because they both finally belonged, not to families or expectations, but to each other. And that was more than enough. It was everything. So if you've ever felt overlooked, unheard, or dismissed, remember this: your light matters. The world may not always thank you, but someone somewhere is healing because of your quiet strength. If this story touched your heart, click subscribe, type "I choose truth" in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. Because stories like this, stories of grace, forgiveness, and second chances, are reminders that even after heartbreak, humanity can rise again. Until next time, this is Mr. Crown Stories reminding you, you are seen, you are worthy, and you are the heartbeat this world still needs.